Hey Henry, with all the time and love that you've dedicated to the project, what brought you and what still brings you to the Learning Code?
Outside of the meetings in our immediate cohort, um, to be able to understand why learning is so difficult in higher education in this country has been so interesting to see, because not only do I realize the challenges that I have as a computer science and humanities student at San Jose State that just transferred from Foothill are not unique to myself, they are really by design. So um, one of the uh, one of the themes of the learning code is understanding how learning works, but there are actually many others that Jeff has blogged about, and I'll clip that into this post. But just to be able to help people realize whatever it is that they want to learn in life, in and outside of school, that they can learn, has been a gift that's been passed on to me by our working relationships. And just to forward that message um, is a valuable one.
Henry, as I'm listening to you speak, one thing that comes up to me is that I feel the same way, actually. I feel that you're such an effective communicator and that your contributions in this space have really driven me to think way outside of my comfort zone, which is super exciting. One of the spaces that you do that in actually is the fundamental themes that I'm hoping that we can build as a team in the learning code. And specifically, you just mentioned the mission, and what came to mind was um, when I wrote these years ago, and we've kind of talked through them together. And you had this really kind of powerful response to number 5. So one of the 6 central themes that we're going to be working for, I um, drafted it to read, maximize your long-term financial return from college. In other words, we're going to help students minimize their expenses and maximize their return from their degree. Um, would you share some of the thoughts that go through your mind as you're looking at that, and maybe some critiques or revisions that you might want to leverage to make that particular theme resonate more deeply with the way you think about it?
Sure. I remember pushing back quite a bit on the word financial. When I first started at Foothill Community College, it was after coming back from 6 years of working, post graduating from Henry M. Gunn High School in Palo Alto, to realize that I wanted to start a professional career. And I defined a career back then in terms of how much salary I would be able to make after getting my education. But the critique on the word financial has been one that's long drawn out, on whether we should think about is it more values-based driven or is it more dollar signs driven. My working relationship with both of you has made me realize, after I was able to get 2 technical internships as a computer science major, that not only do the problems in tech, they'll be solved, I think, regardless of my individual contributions. But like, so many of the students that I've tutored over the last 4 years recognize how much salary they would get if they get these credentials and certifications through our educational system. But we still have a problem, which is about half of our students are dropping out. And in fact, even for the ones that do finish their education, oftentimes they don't actually find a meaningful, fulfilling, or well-paying job. So there's so many aspects to our investment in college in this country. And I think the sooner I've been able to tap into the other returns, which is specifically to the learning code, like being able to really feel like whatever it is I want to learn in my life at this stage right now is becoming the best student so that I can become the best educator moving forward. Like, I could really do that. So to empower students to channel what is being delivered to them in their courses and think about the delivery and that content and those subjects and those component skills in a higher order, or with a larger bird's eye vision, is what you two have done for me. And that is, I think, if we could tap into that belief, hope, motivation for other students, or we can help students tap into that, their eyes are going to fully open at that stage.
Steve, did you have a response? I have some stuff to say, but you always have really good insights and
Um,
thoughts, perhaps.
all I'd say is just, I mean, I think that when you're talking about the bird's eye vision and really zooming out on what like the component skills can do for you, I feel if you just isolate a component skill and just think about it for what it is, you don't really value it as much until you see everything kind of working together and finally working for you to not only like get the good grades, but master learning and just enjoying the benefits from that. So, yeah.
I grew up in a really affluent area, so many many people around my area have become quite successful in STEM and in Silicon Valley. But for me, those financial returns from college never motivated me to my core of learning the material that is being presented to me in my courses. However, learning the material that's being presented to me in my courses to help students learn the material more effectively is literally a 180 almost, besides the fact that we're learning similar concepts. But in terms of drive, that is something that was completely untapped.
As you're speaking, something that comes up for me, I love that feedback. You like that analysis of focusing away from the financial to the value. Number 4 on that really, and we'll talk about this in a different video, but the idea of defining a professional vision statement based on the most cherished values, it kind of assumes that we understand what our most cherished values are and then know how to channel them. And so I think there are some of those things in that number 4, which is kind of nice. But I agree with you completely that the idea of a financial return is too limiting, because I said this to Steve the other day, making money is easy. Doing so in ethically and morally aligned ways, things that we feel good about doing, that's a little bit harder because it takes a lot more time to think through. I guess my point on this one was, I feel like the college industrial complex, I don't know how you would say that, just watch Iron Man 3 or Iron Man 2 or whatever, where he's doing the MIT presentation. There's a lot of money at MIT. There's a lot of money at Stanford. There's a lot of money at UC Berkeley. And those schools capture the imagination of so many of our young folks as if those are the only places we should go. If we think about expenses, or if we think about the cost of a college degree and the return on the college degree, it's going to be assets minus liabilities, right? Or another way to say that, the amount of money that comes in minus the money that comes out, right? And so I think one of the things that a lot of students do is they assume that if they pay more money up front, they're going to have a higher return. But I like to say that the student makes the school doesn't make the student. So, and you guys know that whole thing. And so I guess my point on that is, one of the things that I think that we can do is kind of reframe the idea of defining a college education and finding value. And one of those is to find value where most people don't see it, or another way to say that, where the media doesn't necessarily attach value to. So for example, you guys got a better first 2-year education from Foothill College than I got at UC Santa Barbara, guaranteed. I never had a relationship this close with any of my professors, and I've seen you guys do things at Foothill College that I think to myself, like, oh my God, I wish I would have done that at UCSB. And so I guess that was the point on that, you know, to really try to capture the idea that we as students make the value in our education. And if we're smart about how we navigate these institutions, assuming we don't go to like DeVry or one of these places that are trying to defraud you, right? But like, just to kind of push us to think critically about the idea that we can get a Harvard level education at Foothill Community College or Kenyatta or Ohlone or any of the other places, right?
Oh yeah, and I just like to add that I actually got the 2-year education from both the community college and the UC, and it's so disappointing to see that like the UCs or like any like 4-year university will get all the credit and community colleges don't get any credit at all, when really it should be the opposite.
I think this is essential, this discussion. The longer I'm in STEM as an undergraduate student, the more I feel like this degree is just catered towards a vocational trade school education, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's plenty of benefits if you look at the advantages of vocational and trade school education, but it misses out on a lot of things, such as if our values are perhaps social or racial justice, citizenship, what is being a global citizen, or what we want to be remembered for when we're 80, and we don't reverse engineer those thoughts, we lose a lot along the way. And in fact, there are plenty of well-paid people who are not very happy with their lives. And if you just interview a few of them, you can get to those kernels of
and I think that's, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, and I think that's such an important thing, because I see so many people that actually I've had many of my students go on to UC Berkeley, or I've had people go on to Stanford and just be miserable because they like the image, the vision, the fantasy of those schools more than they like the reality. And the reality of those schools is that many of them are quite cutthroat, and they're not really designed to be student-centered. Or another way to say that is, it is assumed that when you enter those schools, you're basically a professional learner. And so you're just thrown into the deep end with the sharks. And when you get there, I will say that happened for me at UC Santa Barbara, which is not a Stanford level school or UC Berkeley, but I got into UC Berkeley and I refused to go there because I felt like on the tour, they were already basically grooming me to think I'm better than other people. And when you're here, this is going to be really hard. And I just thought to myself, like, first of all, we are all privileged to be in this space. And second of all, isn't it your job to find ways to support me? like, isn't it? And that's not the message that I got. The message that I got, I remember the guy on the tour was like, we have 17 Nobel laureates. And when you're a Nobel laureate, you get a special parking spot and you don't have to teach as much. And I was like, how are you telling this to a 17-year-old who's trying to go, like, I don't care how many Nobel laureates you have. What I care is, are you going to help me get an education and feel good about myself when I'm there? And I got the feeling that I wouldn't. And I guess the point of this conversation is to say that so often the fantasy and the prestige end up being really, really psychologically painful. Just like you were saying, right? Just like so often the paycheck, that's the 6-figure paycheck right out of college, it looks really sexy from the outside, but when you actually get placed, especially if I haven't done a lot of thinking about what it is that I want out of my life and what I want out of that paycheck, the reality of that paycheck is actually a lot more psychologically destructive than the image of what that paycheck is prior to getting it, right? And I think what's so important and why I love your statement is that it's a recapitulation of the same idea. I don't think my words were as powerful as yours in that way, but instead of thinking about college as an investment to maximize the return, is to reimagine what it means to get a degree and to find ways to create that value at schools that are psychologically and emotionally supportive, right? And to redefine what that investment is. And so that's what I was trying to say in that. I didn't say it very well because I used the language of capitalism in that, but I agree completely that the message that you're saying, you said it way more eloquently than that number 5, but I think it's so important to just like find ways to empower ourselves first and foremost, but then others as well to center that while we go through our educational process, right?
These are not easy conversations to have, especially when our parents are like, go to Berkeley, go to this, go to that. But this is just the beginning of this series. So we hope to equip you with some of these ideas and discussion points so that you can have conversations with your peers and your parents about what it means, like what is college and what is an education? Because only then will you understand the price of a Lamborghini. And only then will you realize buying a Lamborghini doesn't actually help your immediate community. So, okay. All right.
Thank you so much for sharing, Henry. Awesome.